Today I'm going to go through CARs for every major joint in your body. But before we get into the controlled articular rotations themselves, I want to give a little bit of the why behind the what of CARs. So why do we prioritize CARs so much? CARs is an exploration of the entirety of your joint's available range. So we use CARs to see if your joint can actually do everything that the anatomy dictates it should do. We emphasize the rotational component because for every joint in the body, with the exception of the spine, rotation is the fundamental motion. If your shoulder, if your hip, for example, does not rotate well, then they actually do not do anything else well. So with the CARs, we prioritize the rotational foundation of the joint motion to give us a clear understanding of whether or not that joint is actually doing what it should be doing based on the anatomy. A few rules before we get into the CARs. Remember, the number one rule of FRC, of Kinstretch, of any of this work is no closing angle pain or even closing angle restriction, really any closing angle sensations. So an example for the shoulder. As I bring my shoulder into flexion, this angle is closing and this angle is opening. What should prevent my shoulder from coming into more flexion is a stretch on the opening side, not a restriction or a pain on the closing side. If we ever have closing angle sensations, especially closing angle pain or a pinch point is a good way to describe it, on the closing side of a joint, that means that range is not trainable for that joint, and so we're never going to work into it. What that means for our CARs is that if we come up on a pinch point, then we just carve out that part of the CAR. So a shoulder CAR, for example, if I had a pinch point here of my shoulder flexion, I wouldn't continue grinding into that pinch point. My circle would carve out a bit and become a Pac-Man. So I may run into a pinch point, and then as I start to come down, maybe the pinch point is clear, and now I can explore that available range. So remember, our CARs are always our safest, painless, greatest exploration of our joint's available range of motion. So we talked about no closing angle sensations. We've talked about the rotational component. Another thing that we like to implement with our CARs is what we call irradiation. So when I irradiate, I create tension throughout my entire body so that I can max out the effort that I'm getting with the target joint. So when I do a shoulder CAR, for example, I'm going to tense up the rest of my body. Now, this is kind of a choose your own adventure intensity. We can create tension throughout our whole body at 10, 20, 30, 50, 60, 70, 80%, really whatever it is. For our purposes today, I want more of a training stimulus, so I would challenge you to create a pretty high amount of tension throughout your entire body to help keep all those joints locked down so that we can really maximize the effort for our target joint. Now, as we walk through the CARs, your job is to only move the joint that I'm asking you to move. So for an example, when I do a neck CAR, I want to watch out for maybe my shoulders or my spine or my hips coming along for the ride. Our body's really good at compensating to complete a task. But remember, I don't care about a task. I care about expressing what the joint can do. So for the neck CAR, let's say that I were to have to use my shoulders to get way over here. Well, guess what? That's not using neck. That's using other joints to make up for what the neck is not capable of. So our CARs always need to be honest. I don't care about a big, impressive circle. I care about an honest circle. So when I say make the biggest circle possible with your joints, it's making the biggest circle possible with that joint, not just making the biggest circle possible regardless of what else has to come along for the ride. So as we go through these CARs, our number one rule, no closing angle sensations. We don't work through it, we carve it out. We want to prioritize rotation for every joint. The exception is the spine. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get there. And we want to irradiate, being a solid statue so that we're maximizing the effort with the joint that we are targeting. So I'm going to start with our neck CAR. And the neck is the spine. The fundamental motion of the spine is actually flexion and extension. So our priority will be our ability to flex and extend the spine, and that allows us to explore more of the rotation. So as we start our neck car, I like to fold my arms across my chest, and then I'm going to think slowly, segmentally, one vertebrae at a time, tucking my chin into my collarbone. And notice I'm only using neck. I'm not using the rest of my spine. I'm not using my hips. I'm only using neck. So I'm going to tuck my chin into my collarbone, and then I'm going to drag my chin along my left collarbone. I run out of rotation. I'm going to dip my left ear toward the floor behind me as if I'm pouring water out of it. I'm going to continue passing through, reaching my chin to the ceiling, and then I'm going to pour water out of my right ear onto the floor behind me. Chin contact shoulder, collarbone, and then I'll pass through for another repetition, squeezing out all of my available range. And I'll do a side view for the other direction, sweeping to the right, tilting the ear, reaching the chin, tilting the ear, contacting opposite side, keeping my full body tension the entire time, doing my best to not let other joints get involved, and then I'll slowly, segmentally begin looking up back into my starting position. Next, we're going to move into scapula. Scapula is not shoulder. Scapula is that large flat bone behind your shoulder. A lot of times we don't think about the scapula in isolation. We just tend to think about our shoulder or our spine, but we forget that there's a whole big influential piece right in the middle of those two. So what we're going to do now is actually isolate the scapula. So for my scapular cars, I'm going to glue my middle fingers to my pant seams right here. And as I go through my scapular cars, what you'll notice is that my hands are not moving off of my pant seam or flaring out to the side. If I get an excessive amount of hand movement relative to my legs, that means that I'm actually using shoulder rather than scapula. So as we do this, we want to keep our hands with a minimum movement glued to our pant seams. So I'm going to face the other direction as I talk through the scapular cars so that you can see my scapulas moving. So for my scapular cars, gluing my hands into my pant seams, full body irradiation. I'm going to make the biggest shrug of my life, and I'm going to keep that shrug as I pull my scaps together. I'm going to keep my scaps together as I press them down toward the floor. I'm going to keep them pressed down toward the floor as I spread them apart. I'm going to keep them apart as I shrug them up. And now, I just cued you very north, south, east, west. I want you to fill in every direction in between so that we're actually making scapula circles rather than scapula squares. But if you try to stay on the edge of that box, then it ensures that we're actually squeezing out that extra little millimeter of available range when we do our scapular cars. So we'll pass through, driving our car at 1 mile an hour. We're slow and controlled here. And then we can reverse it. So it's the same sequence, just in reverse. Watch out for that neck getting involved. A lot of times we'll trick ourselves into thinking that our neck movement is our scapula. It is not. Shoulder is not scapula. Scapula is not spine. So let's make sure that we're staying as honest as possible as we walk through these scapula cars. Good. Now we're going to move into shoulder cars. Shoulder cars is really a good expression of that rotational priority. So for my shoulder car, irradiating, I'm going to show you my palm, I'm going to show you my bicep. I'm going to keep this other hand glued into my side, maybe press into my side a little bit, create some irradiation. Now I'm going to keep showing you my palm, showing you my bicep, and then I'm going to begin reaching across and up. And then, as soon as my bicep is by my ear, I'm going to spin my bicep away, which is bringing my shoulder into internal rotation as I reach back and down. I'm going to continue trying to squeeze out that IR the whole way down until my knuckles and my bicep are facing me. I'm going to keep my knuckles and bicep facing me as I reach back and up as far as possible, and then I'm going to hit a roadblock. I hit my roadblock, and now I'm going to wring out this towel, bringing my shoulder from IR back into ER, and then I will continue squeezing out ER as I sweep across and down, retracing the path that I just came from. So let's do one more on this right side, sweeping across and up. Bicep by ear, and don't trick yourself by just turning the wrist. We need to make sure that that bicep is spinning, because that is shoulder IR. We're not just looking to flip that wrist around. Knuckles, bicep facing your side, reach back and up. We hit a roadblock, wring out that towel, and retrace the circle, maximizing that ER the whole way down. Good. We'll go side view for the left side. So now I'm showing this wall here, or that direction, my bicep, my palm, as much ER as I can, and I'm going to sweep across and up. Now you'll really be able to see my bicep turn toward you. As I reach back and down, you see I'm still squeezing out IR the whole way down. The lower your arm gets, the more IR you'll be able to claim typically. And then I'm going to reach back and up. Oh, here a little crack there. Painless Rice Krispies are fun. We just don't want any pain on that closing angle. We would carve it out. Now, as we do the shoulder cars, it's good to think about trying to keep that scapula back and down so that we're not fooling ourselves right here by bringing that scapula up. This is scapula movement. This is not shoulder movement. So you can see when I'm in max flexion, I can cheat a little more by getting my scapula involved, but that's scapula, not shoulder. So I want to try to keep that scapula out of this as I reach back and down, biceps, knuckles facing me, reach back and up, wring out that towel, and bring that second and final rep on the left side to completion. Okay. Now we're going to move into elbow cars. Yes, elbows are not only flexion and extension. The deepest fibers of the elbow are actually oriented toward rotation. I do not have great pronation, so I'm not the best person to demo elbow cars, but we'll work with what I have. Elbow cars are interesting because we typically don't think about a whole lot of elbow effort. So what I want you to do as you irradiate your entire body is think about the air being 50, 60, 70% thicker so that you're having to work your way through that thick environment. To start, show me your palms, show me your biceps. And you're going to show me your biceps the whole time. This is supination, showing me your palms, and then we're going to bring those elbows into flexion. If you were Iron Man right now and you were shooting lasers out of your palms, they would be shooting beside and behind you. We don't want to be shooting your own face when we first come into flexion. Now, I'm going to take my Iron Man lasers and begin turning them toward me while not changing the direction that my biceps are facing. And then the air is thick and I'm slowly working my way down. You can see how poor my pronation is right here. And now we're going to supinate at the bottom and come back up. Something to watch out for when we move from supination to pronation is for those elbows flaring out. If the elbows flare out, I'm using shoulder, I'm not using elbow. So let's ensure that as we move from supination into pronation, that we're being honest. You see, if I were to show you my palms fully, I would have to use shoulder stuff to do it. I need to be working on my elbow pronation more than I am. And let's relax. Now we're going to move into wrist cars. For your wrist cars, you're going to show your palms to the ceiling, and then you're going to pretend that you have two big glasses of your favorite beverage balancing on your forearms. And as we move through the wrist cars, your job is to not spill your beverages. We're not doing elbow rotation anymore. So my forearms should be facing the ceiling the entire time. So balance those beverages on your forearms, and we're going to move into our wrist cars. Pull the pinkies together. Keep the pinkies as close as you can. They're going to come apart a little bit as you pull the knuckles toward the floor. using that backside of wrist stuff to pull your knuckles down, pull them down and back. Now, try to keep those knuckles down, and you're gonna pull the thumbs apart, and now you're naturally gonna come into some wrist flexion to where your palms are now moving toward you. Now we're making the biggest, painless circles that we can with our wrist. Good, good. And let's reverse it. So we're gonna reverse it by pulling the thumbs out, pulling the knuckles down, pulling the pinkies together, and then pulling the palms up. And we'll reverse that. Your wrists are cramping, you're doing it right. And relax. Now we're gonna move into spinal cars. Spinal cars, I'll go ahead and warn you, are the most difficult for most people to learn, just because most people are very disconnected from their spines. To start our spinal cars, we're going to widen the feet. This is just gonna help us be more aware of any potential pelvis, hip compensations. To start our spinal cars, we're gonna fold our hands across our chest, and you're gonna pretend that you're a solid statue from the pelvis down. We're folding the arms across the chest, and then from the bottom of our neck all the way down, we're slowly, segmentally folding into forward flexion. Now, this is about all I have, and you'll see that I'm not looking at the floor. If you're in this position, that most likely means that you got hips, pelvis involved by spilling the pelvis back. When we do our spinal cars, we don't want the pelvis spilling back, spilling forward. So really make sure that you are a statue from the waist down this whole time. So I'm going to fold back into forward flexion, creating a nice stretch in the back of my spine. Now I'm going to bring my right shoulder to my left side just with rotation. I've maxed out my rotation. I'm going to dip my left shoulder toward the floor beside and behind me. I've maxed out my lateral flexion. Now from the low back up, I am going to slowly, segmentally extend, not letting my pelvis shoot forward. And then I'm going to mirror that rotation and lateral flexion on the opposite side. So I'm rotated left to right, and I'm dipping my right toward the floor. And then I'm going to unwind that rotation and fold back into forward flexion. We're going to pass through this direction a little more fluidly one more time, then do a side view. So I'm rotation, dip, extend, mirror, unwind, and fold. Now we're going to do the opposite side. I'm going to give you a side view. So make sure we have that forward flexion to start. Left shoulder rotates to right side. Right shoulder dips to left floor, to right floor. Slowly, segmentally extend. Mirroring that position on the opposite side. And then unwinding back into forward flexion. Let's pass through for another rep. And I'm cueing this very choppy, very distinct. As you learn where your spine should actually move, you will be able to go through these spinal cars with more fluidity, and it won't be as rigid. So our goal is to be as smooth as possible with all of this movement. We're going to move into hip cars. Now, I'm going to use my stick mobility stick just to give myself a little extra support on this opposite side. You could use a wall or anything to balance on. Really, you shouldn't be relying on the object for a whole lot of balance, but if we have a little bit of support, it allows us to squeeze out a little more in range. So, for my hip car, I'm going to put the stick in my opposite hand, and I'll be training my right hip. I'll start by bending my knee to 90 degrees. Rest of my body's locked down, no other joint is moving. I'm going to begin bringing my knee to my chest. As soon as my foot clears, I'm going to hacky sack across my body to bring my hip into external rotation. Now, I'm going to let my foot drop directly under my knee, elevate the knee, and then bring my knee out to the side. Once I've maxed out this abduction, I'm going to turn the outside of my ankle toward the ceiling to bring my hip into internal rotation. As I reach back, reach the thigh back, keep that IR as the knees meet. That's half a rep. Now we're going to reach back, knees out. Here's that wring out the towel sensation as we transition back into a neutral hip. Knees high, back into hacky sack ER, and then I just sort of snake back into that original starting position. One more on this side, then we'll do side view for the left. So, knees at 90, knees coming up, hacky sack into ER. Foot drops under knee, knees high, and out. Hit a roadblock outside of ankle to ceiling, reaching back, and then knees together. Knee reaches back, out, wring out the towel, knees high, back into ER, snake back into that starting position. So what you'll notice is that I'm not getting a bunch of torso movement here. And I'm also not getting a bunch of movement from my opposite hip. If I were to have headlights on either side of my pelvis, my headlights would be shooting straight forward the whole time. They would not be deviating side to side. So that may be a compensation to watch out for as we move into this left side. So we'll do side view for the left. We're bringing that knee to 90. And we're coming up, hacky sack across into ER. Foot drops, knees high, knees out. Outside of ankle to ceiling as we reach back, knees together. Knees are together, reaching back, knees out. Wring out that towel, bringing the knee high, and back into ER, snake back into that starting position. One more on this side, knees up, hacky sack across, knee high, knee out, IR, ankle to ceiling, reaching back, knees together. Reach the thigh back, knee comes out, wring out that towel, knees high, hacky sack into ER, and snake back into the starting position. All right, we're going to move into our knee cars. Yes, knees actually rotate. So for our knee cars, you can have a seat on the floor, and we're just going to hold our leg in position here. And what I want you to find, just looking over the horizon of your patella, that big bone that turns the top of your leg into the bottom of your leg. See that big patella? Just over the horizon of it, you'll see a big bump, and that's your tibia, where your tibia comes in to form the knee joint. And guess what? Just like the elbow, the knee does not just flex and extend, it actually has some rotation in it. So we want to make sure that we're exploring and training the rotational capabilities of our knees, not just flexion and extension. Sometimes people ask me, well, why is knee rotation important? And I'll say, hey, do you know anyone who's ever torn an ACL, or have you ever torn an ACL? Pretty much everyone has. I say, did that ACL injury occur linearly or laterally or rotationally? 9 times out of 10, laterally, rotationally. So what are we doing to actually train the rotational capacity of the knee? This is a great place to start. So we're just supporting that leg behind the knee. Go ahead and pull your toes as far back as you can. And then we're just going to make this big tibia bone right here tick-tock, out, and in. So it may be a little difficult to see, but we're tick-tocking out, tick-tocking in. Notice I'm not moving my hip out, moving my hip in. I'm also not just turning my foot out, turning my foot in. You will see my foot come along for the ride, but that's just because it has to, because it is connected. So we're going to tick-tock out, and then a slight extension of the knee, not full extension though, because we don't have tibial rotation when our knee is locked out. Tick-tock in and down. So we'll go out, up, in, down, out, up, in, down. And we can reverse it in, up, out, down, in, up, out, down. And then let's do the other side. And you may find that you really don't have much of a Wi-Fi connection to that area. That can happen with any joint, but I find it particularly common with the knee, just because we never think about, we never really intentionally train tibial rotation. So a lot of times, just the effort of trying to move it is all that people need, because they don't have a strong enough Wi-Fi connection to actually move it. So if you don't feel as if you're actually moving your tibia right now, that's very common, but we want to work toward your being able to move your tibia. When we say in FRC, you cannot train what you cannot feel. So if you cannot feel your tibial rotation, then I know that you're not able to specifically train your tibia to be stronger in rotation. So let's support behind the knee, keeping that hip locked in neutral, keeping the foot locked down, and let's tick-tock out and in. Tibia comes out, see that big bone, and in. So it's like that entire calf is just rotating around. Good, good. And let's tick-tock out, slight extension, tick-tock in, down, out, up, in, down, out, up, in, down, and we can reverse it, in, up, out, down, in, up, out, down. Good. And we're going to go back to the opposite side. Same position, but we're going to be training our ankle rotation. So for our ankle rotation, still locking that hip into place. We're not using hip and we're not using knee. A lot of times I'll have people who won't be able to move their tibia when we're trying to move the tibia, but then when they go to move their ankle, they actually move their tibia. So we need to be able to consciously define one joint from another. What is ankle? What is knee? What is hip? We always say in FRC that we need joint independence in order to have optimal joint interdependence, which just means that every joint needs to do its job well all by itself. When that happens, then when the joints come together to do a big job all together, they actually work a lot better than if one is having to take up the slack of another that's not fully doing its job. So we will move into ankle cars for our right ankle. Pull the toes up, turn the foot in. Keep the foot turned in as you point it, that nice ankle spraining position. Now begin pulling your pinky toe to the outside of your shin and pulling those toes back up to the starting position, and we're going to pass through for another rotation on this side. And you may find with your ankle that you have some shaky spots. We're going to reverse direction. It's almost as if your ankle wants to free fall or teleport through a certain range. Those are the ranges where weak Wi-Fi connection, poor quality tissue, increased risk of injury if your ankle ever has to be used in that position. So when we find those shaky spots, teleport free fall zones, we want to make sure we're spending an extra measure of intentionality in that particular range. Let's swap sides, support that leg, pull the toes up, turn the foot in, keep it turned in as we point, and keep it pointed as we pull that pinky toe around, and now pull the pinky toe to the outside of the shin, and we're rotating. Biggest painless circle with your ankle, and let's reverse that. If your plantar fascia cramps while doing these, you're doing them right. One more here, and relax. All right, stand back up. Our final one, toe cars. Guess what? Your toes should have at least some dexterity in them. Now, I'm not the best model for toe cars, but we will work with what I can offer. So, all 5 toes are grounded in the floor. Without rocking back on your feet, rocking to the sides, rocking in on them, I just want you to move the toes. So all 5 of your toes on both feet are down, and now we're going to pull all 5 of them up at the same time. Not rocking back on the heels, still keeping weight in that midfoot while pulling the toes up. And now let's put them all 5 down. All 5 up, all 5 down. Good. Now we're going to keep the big toe down while we pull the other 4 toes up. So big toe down, 4 up, and all of them down. Big toe down, 4 up, and all of them down. Now we're going to reverse it. Forward down, big toes up. Forward down, big toe up, and down, big toe up, and down. All 5 up, spread them apart. Reach the pinky toes out to the side. Reach the big toes in toward one another. And now we're just going to set the pinky toe down. 4th toe down. And here's where I kind of lose it. If you can do these really well, send me a video. Comment, please. I need a toe car model. 3rd toe down. Here's where I just lose it completely. 2nd toe down and big toe down. So let's go through that one more time in the opposite direction. Let's see if you can do it better than I can. All 5 up. Spread them apart. Big toe down. 2nd toe meets it. 3rd toe. 4th toe. And 5th toe. Alright, so that is an introduction for cars for every major joint in our body. Now remember, we have multiple variations for every car. Sometimes we may be sidelined for a hip car. We may be on against the wall for a shoulder car. There's really no right or wrong way to do cars because it's all about our intention, not about the position that we are in. This is typically how I introduce every car in my classes and in my individual sessions. So this is a great starting point for you to begin exploring the entirety of your joint's available range, nourishing that deep tissue, the capsule, on a regular basis to ensure that your joints are going to be healthy for a long time and you can do what you love for as long as possible and most importantly, pain-free.